I'm standing here at our nation's capital, and I'm about to sit down with the deadliest man in U.S. Congress, Eli Crane, Navy SEAL, sniper, and representative for Arizona's 2nd Congressional District.
Water Tower was by far a counter sniper's paradise. It had 360-degree view. There's almost nowhere that a sniper could have, effectively hid from somebody up there.
We're going to discuss service, patriotism, national security, immigration, the attempted assassination of President Trump, and the Epstein files. You don't want to miss this, so stay tuned as we move into the Resilient Show with Congressman Eli Crane. Congressman Crane, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on your show, Chad.
And hosting us in this pretty rad office.
Thank you, brother.
I'm looking around some of your pictures. Got Remy up there, Jocko, Sean.
Yep.
Got Cowboy, Hoyce.
Yep.
It's cool memories in here. I love this.
It's funny because a lot of people that come and sit in that chair don't know who many of those people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remy's an awesome dude.
He is, man. He's been a brother of mine for a long time.
Yeah. I want to get into a lot of stuff. I know you're super busy, first of all, so thanks for doing this. And by the way, you represent the 2nd District, Congressional District in Arizona, which is probably one of my favorite places in the country.
Yeah.
I lived in Prescott, Arizona. I got some great friends up there, man. And I know we both have some mutual friends up there. And it's kind of my little, I feel like it's my little secret place that I want to end up again one day. But what a beautiful place that you get to represent.
Yeah, I was hanging out with some guys up there. I was hanging out with Grant Quezada and some other guys up there, and they were telling me you were coming back. So I was like, sweet, Chad's coming back to Arizona, but we'll see if that ever happens.
I want to make it happen one day. I love Texas, but man, I love that place.
Yeah.
Even if it's a second home to just get away from the Texas heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Grant, Rob, Sam. Have you been in Grant's place, the Founders?
Oh, we spent a lot of time in there, man. That's kind of my home away from home, in the district. So
yeah, it's cool. If anybody watching ever makes it up to Arizona, if you have been like Scottsdale, like Phoenix, take the drive, go up to Prescott. It's beautiful, and go see Grant at the Founders.
Yeah, Founding Fathers Collective, man. He's got a cool speakeasy, cigar shop.
Yeah,
he's got a barber shop in there. He's a great dude, former Ranger, and a serious entrepreneur.
When my son came back from Afghanistan, him and a lot of the Marines that he deployed with out of Anglico, they came in to Prescott, and Grant hosted like them coming back from Afghanistan and down in that speakeasy. Yeah, it's like a true speakeasy too. You go in, it's like it's really cool.
It is cool, man.
Yeah, there's a couple of team guys that retired up there as well, so it's kind of like a really great place for like farmer operators to go.
Yeah.
Mike Glover had built Fieldcraft Survival out of that area.
Okay.
Just like really, you could be outdoors, lots of public land. So
yeah, that's one thing I love about Prescott is, they have so many vets. They attract a lot of, patriotic veterans, first responders to that area. There's a lot of transplants there. And, as somebody who's spent a lot of time in the military, you kind of adopt that culture and, travel around as much as we do. It's always nice to be in a community where, outsiders aren't shunned. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I know you do a lot of work here in DC with the VA, and they say that the Prescott VA is one of the best ones in the country, which happens to be in your district.
Right.
So, and when I was there, I had a really good experience at the VA there. It kind of turned my attitude towards the VA around by just being connected to Prescott VA there.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things from veterans in that area. It doesn't mean that certain things couldn't be improved.
Of course, yeah.
But it's one of the better has one of the better progress reports of a lot of the VAs.
Yeah. Well, you did 13 years as a Navy SEAL, sniper, and
I actually didn't do 13 years as a SEAL. And it's a big part of my story.
Oh, yeah.
I would have loved to have done 13 years as a SEAL, but I failed out of SEAL training the first time that I went to Bud. So I think time in the teams was more like 8 years.
Okay.
But honestly, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own life, Chad, a lot of the failures that you experience often be like the golden moments where you learn the most. And for me, I absolutely found that to be, the case. I made it through Hell Week the first time I went through training, and then was performance dropped like a week and a half later. And, I was obviously upset and, kind of resentful that they dropped me instead of rolling me back, like uh, some of my classmates. But at the end of the day, I deserved it. And it takes a while for a young man to mature and be willing to admit that, hey, man, I could have showed up in better shape. I could have showed up with a better attitude. And I'm going to go back and make it through. And I think when I look back on things in my life, it's often, the failures and the adversity, that has been the most beneficial for me.
Yeah, I kind of a similar experience going through BRC. My going through recon school. I had a group of us were talking on Land Ave, and I remember the captain pulled us aside, and he's like, hey, ask everyone where you're talking, and then the captain's like, he got me with the, hey, devil dog, integrity is the hallmark of all Marines, and were you over there talking, and I was happened to be helping another. Everybody kind of would get through the school together, and so I got a no go for Land Nav, and and ended up having go through the course, passing something I was really good at, getting failed in that, and having to go back to my unit, suck it up, and have to do Land Nav all over again. And then as penance, I had to go through an amphib in February, the RIP class, an amphib in February, just pay that penance and do the long route, and eventually get my recon MOS. But man, it was, but I learned so much from that.
Yeah.
And it was the hard way, and it was embarrassing and tough at the time, but it's the hard way. So for you, like, you go back to the fleet though, right? And
I did. That's one of the worst things. That's one of the worst things about going the Navy path. If you don't succeed, instead of going to an infantry unit like you could have, or many of our colleagues in the Army could have, and still have a chance to get in the fight, that's really not in the cards for us. And so you're definitely rolling the dice if you go the Navy route.
Yeah, what was your MOS in the Navy?
Yeah, so at that time you had to have a SEAL source rating, and I think there were 5 or 6 of them, and one of the SEAL source ratings was gunner's mate, and I'm like, oh cool, yeah. I like guns, I'll go learn about them, and went to gunner's mate A school right out of boot camp, and then went straight to Coronado, San Diego, and classed up with Bud's class 242. And so when I went out to the ship, my job as a gunner's mate was to work in the armory, work on small arms, deal with all the crew serve weapons like the 50 cals, the M60s that we had. And then I also worked on the 5-inch gun a little bit, and a lot of sweeping and polishing brass and needle gunning. And, but like I said, man, I deserved it. And I met a lot of great guys out in the fleet that are still friends of mine today. And, like I said, I'm grateful. And, one of my favorite scriptures is James 1:2. And it says, pure joy. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, for it's the testing of your faith that breeds perseverance. Let perseverance continue so that you may become mature, complete, and lacking in nothing. And all of us want what's at the end of that verse, but none of us want like the trials of many kinds. Right. And to this day, I still struggle to find it pure joy when I'm walking through these trials of many kinds, but it's a great verse. And I think, for any young man or young woman out there that is watching this program, like if you want to do something great with your life, the trials are inevitable. Yeah. And how you deal with them is going to really, in large part, determine what you end up becoming.
Well, there's your message on resilience right there. I don't think there's anything great that I've been able to be a part of in my life that hadn't come on the other side of a challenge or struggle or obstacle. Yeah. I think it could be said for most of us.
Well, and too, like when you look at our culture, like we definitely, I think, at least over the last decade that I've been observing, have developed this kind of victim mentality, right? It's like, instead of a victor mentality, which is what you and I are talking about, where it's like everybody's so focused on what they didn't have, who has it better, what obstacles are going to keep them from doing things, instead of, what do I have going for me? Where's the finish line and how do I get there? And I took that into entrepreneurship, I take it into what I do now, and I try not to focus on what I don't have, who's in a better position, what they have that I don't. It's just, all right, what's my goal and how am I going to get there?
Yeah. Uh, Eventually make it back to Buds, become a SEAL. Like
Yep.
you said, 8 years. Also became a SEAL sniper.
Yeah.
Went to Iraq. All those experiences. Was there anything that you experienced that made you think, man, when this uniform comes off, I want to be sitting where you're sitting now as a U.S. Congress member?
Not at all. Matter of fact, I've had two of my best friends tell me over the years that I was going to run for Congress or something, and I blew them both. I just laughed at them. I'm like, you are out of your mind. It's funny that you and me are such close friends, and you think I would ever do something like that. And it's like, and it's just funny how God works, man. Because like I was running a business at the time, and I felt like God was calling me and my wife both felt like God was calling us out of business. And it was interesting because we went up to Sedona. That's one of her favorite places to celebrate her birthday. And we both felt like God was telling us up in Sedona that weekend to put our home on the market and put our business on the market. And he had something for us. And I thought, because of some of the things that God had done in my life, that my calling was to go into men's ministry, like you've done such a phenomenal job at doing. And so I started putting my resume in with certain men's ministries, and I was just getting the Heisman. And I was like, this doesn't make sense, God. I thought this is what you were telling me to do. And it was interesting because a couple weeks after that weekend, a lady reached out to me who was a general consultant in politics who runs some pretty big candidates in races. And she said, hey, I'm going to be in Arizona next week. We've been trying to flip this seat in Arizona for about 10 years and we haven't been able to do it. And we think you can do it. And that was because 9 months earlier, she had asked me to, or not she, but somebody else had asked me to be in a political commercial. And so we met with her that week. I told her I'd get back to her. I took a couple weeks to pray about it, talk to friends and family about it, see if it's always good to bounce a decision like that off of trusted advisors. Do you think this is crazy? And we just both felt, initially my wife, who's more like the brakes in our relationship and I'm more like the gas. After a couple weeks, she was like, hey, I'm surprised you haven't jumped at this opportunity. And I was like, well, babe, I felt like God was calling me into men's ministry. Politics is the opposite, complete opposite. Yeah. And Chad, she said one of the coolest things my wife's ever said to me. She said, do you not think God can use you in Washington, D.C.? And I was like, check, Roger that. And, even right now, you and me are sitting in my office doing a podcast. Yeah. This will go out and reach plenty of people. And one of the things that we will talk about today is Christ.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, God could use you anywhere.
Yeah.
Use the basement of a prison like Paul, or it's I think we have it all figured out, our path figured out, and God just kind of laughs.
I agree.
But man, and if there's any place that men of God need to be right now, and of course, men's ministry need to be there. But if there's any place that men of God need to be, it's right here in Washington D.C. And so I'm thankful that you answered that call and we have your voice here in D.C.
I couldn't agree more. This place it's pretty godless and pretty wicked, and that doesn't mean that there aren't believers here and men of faith here. But man, this is a wicked town. Yeah, it's a very wicked town.
Yeah. Well, we're thankful for you being here, and I know midterms coming up. We'll be praying that God puts more men of God in these seats.
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on as we talk about midterms coming up and people who take off the uniform, right, and have served? Do you think this is a good fit? Being in Congress, being a representative is a good fit for military service members to come in and serve. I mean, historically, we've had a lot of, I think more in our history, we've had a lot of men and women that served in uniform serve as representatives afterwards, but it's kind of gotten less and less. That was kind of almost seems like an anomaly, like guys like you. Do you think it's a good fit?
I do overall.
Yeah.
I do overall, because I think that anybody that put on that uniform and was willing to give their life for the country is a lot less likely to sell it out.
Right.
What I would say, and this has just been an observation of mine, is one of the biggest struggles that military guys have when they come up here, and this is just my opinion, you can take it or leave it. I think oftentimes military guys come here and they're so used to the chain of command, rank and file. They believe that the leadership in their party is their new chain of command, and they're supposed to follow orders and do whatever they're told. I don't believe that at all. And I believe that your chain of command is back home in your district and your constituents. And that's how I've tried to, conduct myself up here. And sometimes that puts me at odds with leadership. And if that's the case, then, I'm going to do, because I'll tell you right now, Chad, I know in my district and I know all around the country when I talk to people, they're not exactly excited about the Republican Party a lot of the time. They feel oftentimes like the Republican Party is maybe a little less bad than the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
And because it's such a swampy place. And so if you can reconcile that and you want to come up here and serve your country again, I think it's great.
Yeah. I'm so relieved to hear you say that, because I've observed that from friends that I've had come up here, and we're so used to that, I'm coming up here now. I'm the freshman, right? Who's in charge of me? But what you said was, I mean, I hope everyone's paying attention to what you said. It's, as a U.S. congressman, as a representative, you serve the constituents of your district.
Yeah.
You're coming up here as a citizen representative of your district. And I think that's the way our founders meant it to be. Like, you're a businessman, you're a minister, you're a whatever, a lawyer, a doctor, you coming from your district.
Yeah.
You represent. It's not a professional career. You're not joining the GOP and falling in line, that rank and file. You come to represent your constituents. And I think so many military veterans, or not, like just representatives in general, miss that. And so you say it.
And that doesn't mean there aren't times to, get on board the bus and join the team and understand that, this battle that we're about to have, the good outweighs the bad, and sometimes you gotta make those tough decisions, right? And I'm not saying you need to fight with leadership at every single turn. And
of course, yeah.
I don't think that's wise either. But I do think that too many veterans come up here and instead of recognizing that the chain of command is back home, find a new one here.
Hey guys, Robichaux here, former Marine, humanitarian, and host of The Resilience Show. And I want to talk to you about Goldco. I do not like to promote anything that I'm not a personal user of. And one of the things I'm really into, and have been for a while, is just preparing for anything that could go wrong, from natural disasters to security threats to the grid going down and financial instabilities, particularly in our financial markets. And so a long time ago, I made the decision to invest in precious metals, mainly gold and silver, because to have those tangible assets on hand makes you prepared and makes you resilient. And that's what the Resilience Show is all about: informing, educating, and equipping people to be resilient. And I partnered with the #1 precious metals company in the industry because I want to bring the right people not only to my own family dynamic, but make them available to you. If you're looking for gold and silver tangible on hand, then they're the place to go to. They have become an incredible partner, and they have special bonus offers that you can find if you go to chadlikesgold.com. You could get, if you buy with cash, you get 10% extra, a free gold or silver. You get your own safe at your house. For larger orders, you get a free home safe. There's tons of additional things you can get. So get equipped, be prepared, be resilient by going to chadlikesgold.com and get your tangible gold and silver today. So you wear a lot of different, like any good congressman, you can wear a lot of different hats when you're here, different committees and different things.
Yeah.
One of the committees that, or maybe not committees, task forces you didn't get on that I thought you should have, was when President Trump had the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. They put a task force together for the assassination attempt. You and Corey Mills. I was on online championing, like, you guys need to be on.
Yep.
But you did your own little independent investigation, and I was really happy. I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because when I first saw this, and it's left the media cycle, which it shouldn't have, because we all still deserve to know what happened. The first thing I saw when I looked at this was someone in very close range, 150 yards or so, close range.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that's far, but as you know, as a SEAL sniper, that's not far at all. And anyone that would have done a far advance, like a security vulnerability assessment, would have identified that roof and said that, hey, this is the nearest vantage point with a direct line to where the president's going to be. You have now you either need to have Overwatch or static security on that point, which they didn't have neither. They canceled meetings with the local police force, the Secret Service did.
Yep.
My impression, not to bash on them, but almost you can't not, like, I thought they had the Secret Service B team on not only a presidential candidate, but probably the most at-risk principal in the world, President Trump at the time.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have communication with the local authorities. No one was watching this water tower. Like, there's so many things I'm looking at, and I'm like, man, like, why not have the right people in this investigation? I don't know if they did or didn't, but I know you should have been and you wasn't. Corey Mills wasn't. So what did you guys find out when you went and put boots in the ground, stood on the roof of that building?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that you just pointed out, when Corey and I went, we actually went on a trip with Mark Green and the Homeland Security Committee before that. And, I made a video pointing out that the water tower was by far a counter sniper's paradise. That's where any counter sniper should have been. It was by far the highest terrain feature. It had 360-degree view. There's almost, nowhere that a sniper could have, effectively hid from somebody up there. That was the thing that stood out to me the most. But then, one of the things that I think her name was Cheadle at the time, had said in a hearing was that the roof was too sloped to get people up there. And one of the things in going to the site that I saw was that not only did I walk right up it, but an 80-year-old man walked right up it right behind me with no problem whatsoever. So that was a lie and false. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing too was we also got to get into the building that was right behind that roof, or even connected to that roof, and saw one of the offices that, counter sniper teams were in. And, had they even, poked their head out of the window, they would have been able to see Thomas Crooks like 40 yards away from them. They could have taken him out with a pistol shot, So there were so many things that were wrong with that, to be honest. I'm still working with somebody in the administration behind the scenes to try and get answers that we still don't have, primarily regarding his phones. And, that's who he was contacting, bank accounts, those type of things. But, even folks within the administration that would like some of those answers too are also getting stonewalled by bureaucracy up here. So it's just
like within the FBI, within.
There's a couple different places where we're trying to get information from, and that's one of the most frustrating things about being up here, Chad, is that I think what a lot of the bureaucrats believe up here is that, well, the average lifespan of a politician is 6 years. I can just wait this guy out, And so you just have to be resilient, and you have to be patient and know that you're not going to get answers right away. And you just have to continue to keep knocking at that door.
What's the status of the investigation, the official investigation, not what you're doing, but like the official investigation? Is it just like dead? Is it?
Yeah, I think they had a report that they dropped after their investigation, and I think that they see that as case closed.
I don't know if you can answer this or not. Do you believe that Thomas Crooks was a lone gunman, or do you think he had some help?
I think anytime you do an investigation like that, I think what you want to do is you want to go into it with the mindset of anything is possible and see where the evidence takes you. Not, I'm going to form my own theory here and, try and investigate it until my theory is proved correct. So could he have been working by himself? It's possible. Could he have been working with others? That's very possible as well.
Do you see any? Has anything you've seen shown that there would have been some uh, complicit behavior within our own government?
Um, I would say, definitely information showing our government heavily dropping the ball, not only from the president at the time, President Biden, denying, President Trump's Secret Service the assets that they were asking for, but many of the things that we just covered. One of the things too that a lot of Americans don't understand is as a candidate at that level, one of the things that Secret Service has to do is if you decide that you're going to go to a certain location that might be a very high risk location, Secret Service, like if the candidate says this is what I'm doing, they have to go, even if they don't have the resources to cover, all the threats at that location. And one of the things that I was asking is, did anybody within the Secret Service, tell the president's campaign or his team that this is not a good site to do a rally at?
Yeah.
Right? Did anybody have the courage to even say that? Because let's face it, a lot of politicians, they have no understanding of threat environments. They've never worked in the fields that we do, where you learn how to actually execute some of these missions. And once you work in those type of fields, you're very hypersensitive to the vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah. Any personal security detail, PSD, or surveillance detection team that's their job, is to advise the principal and the principal's team, like,
yeah,
what the threats are, and give advice on that.
And I think so many folks are so much more worried about their career and just being the guy that says, no problem, sir, we'll get it done, instead of, hey, with all due respect, sir, this is probably not a good venue for us to host it at. And the thing is, when we were looking into this, there was an airfield that was nearby that was a lot more secure, just because it was an airfield and it had fencing and, but yeah, that was definitely not a good venue. And I hope that, some folks in the Secret Service that had advisement and responsibilities, and how Butler went down, have learned their lesson. And I hope others that had nothing to do with it learn from others' mistakes and realize that, hey, if something like that comes my way, I'm going to poke my head up and I'm going to say, hey, this probably isn't a good idea. Now, if the campaign or the presidential candidate says, well, noted, I hear what you're saying, but we're doing it anywhere, then you have to do it anyway, right? But at least you can have a clear conscience knowing that, I at least made the suggestion that this isn't a good place to hold this event.
Yeah. Yeah. My conspiracy mind runs crazy with this stuff. I look at all these things, and I know everyone else does too. And I'm like, CNN, CNN, for example, was filming live that day and never did that for the president in that day. And I was just like, who knew about this? So my mind.
Yeah. That was another
wanders in a lot of places.
That was another, thing that didn't look good and doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But another thing that I've observed is up here is, even sometimes when, my spidey senses and my gut are telling me something's not right, doesn't always mean that I'm right.
Right.
And so I think there has to be that level of skepticism, but caution at the same time, especially like some of the things now that I'm seeing in social media, where people will just take something, that might not look or feel right, and they're taking it, and I mean, they put a flag in the ground and like they're gonna ride or die on that theory. I don't think that's wise either.
Yeah, I don't either. And you see it more and more. It's like you just totally polar opposites, one and another, and you feel like you have to. And the truth is usually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
it usually is. Yeah, it's somewhere in the middle. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are still working on this. I really hope some truth comes out on this, because I mean, look, I think the American people are really just tired of not getting answers on Las Vegas, Butler, Mar-a-Lago. Like we just want answers. I think the American people, your constituents, the constituents of the president, we just want answers on some of these things.
Yeah, one thing I will tell your viewers is that I have done some work with the current director of the Secret Service, Sean Curran. Amazing guy. He was actually on the stage that day. He's the big, tall guy with
Oh yeah,
sunglasses
yeah,
on.
yeah,
In that famous photo that everybody's seen of the president with blood on his ear.
yeah.
He's one of the most humble guys I've met in Washington, D.C.
Mm.
And one of the things that under the Biden administration, an IG report came out that talked about the deficit in how many counter snipers the Secret Service had, and how many hours of overtime that counter snipers within the Secret Service were working. And I mean, it was bad. It was, I can't even remember the number now. I think it was, they had a deficit of like over 50%. And so we started working with the new director of the Secret Service, who is the type of guy who he takes advice from people. He actually takes advice from people. And one of the things that I had said on a media show is, when I looked at the pipeline of a Secret Service sniper, I think it was almost a 1.5 or 2 year pipeline. And I'm thinking to myself, my sniper pipeline was 3 months, and it's one of the longest schools in NSW. Why can't we take some of these guys that have these qualifications already and, get some type of accelerated pipeline into the Secret Service so that these guys can go from the, military special forces, help fill that gap, still, make a decent paycheck, but at least be in CONUS in the United States. And so, there are things that
Kind of like the FBI did with HRT, right? You're not guaranteed. You guaranteed a shot,
right.
And accelerate past the other FBI agents.
Yeah,
Of that accelerated pipe program to get into it.
Yeah. So those are the types of things that you know, um, you know, we're working on up here. But honestly, this, Chad, it shouldn't matter whether the presidential candidate or anyone in his cabinet is a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
We cannot have our presidents, vice presidents. We cannot have those individuals, being that vulnerable and almost being assassinated multiple times. That's garbage. That cannot happen in the United States of America.
And 100%, doesn't matter. They have an R or D in front of their name. We have to have that level. I mean,
especially in a time where you're starting to see political violence rise and rise. Mm-hmm. Charlie Kirk was a friend of mine, and I mean, Steve Scalise, in Republican leadership, got shot up here. This type of thing is happening way too regularly, and we need to take this stuff seriously. And it's weird, Chad. A lot of guys that are in politics, and the moment you join politics, you're going to be hated by a lot of people, and it's just sad, but it is a reality, right? And a lot of these guys, because they don't come from a field, like you and I did, or law enforcement or whatever, they don't seem to really understand the risks. And so they'll roll around, doing, events with hundreds or thousands of people without any security whatsoever. And it's not wise, man.
No,
it's not wise.
I mean, even as this show's gotten popular, like I feel like I do things that, for the veteran community, I've got so much hate. And I was talking to Sean Ryan about it. He's like, yep, get ready. Like, the more you do, the bigger the platform is, the more people are going to hate you. And then you step, and I've had to really change my lifestyle, like, because I've had some death threats, just because of the platform. No other reason. So I couldn't imagine being in a position where you guys are, because, people know where you're going to be. It's easy to pick up your travel routines, and then you got the doxing. What's your opinion on? I mean, do we need to legislate and make doxing more serious, serious offense?
Yeah, I do think it should. I do think it should be more serious, and I know that that was one thing that Director Patel said early on, is that they were going to treat those cases very seriously, and I'm sure all of your audience knows what that is, but
essentially like putting out how to find you, your address or your whereabouts,
right,
and your personal information.
And one of the things that they'll do is and it's kind of like elevated doxing is swatting, right? They do that to a lot of members of Congress.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So what that is, say you're a member of Congress, Chad, they'll call the police. They'll already know your address, and they'll be like, hey, I heard shooting within, this home. They'll give your address. And so when the police respond to your home at like 2 a.m, right, they're coming to your house thinking that they're about to come up on a live fire, domestic, situation where you're shooting up your house or shooting up your family or whatever it is. And so they get the police there, and then the police are, they're going to attack or deal with that situation like they would any other situation, not knowing really who you are. And so think about it. You wake up at 2 a.m, you've got a SWAT team outside your house, lights flashing in your window. You see a silhouette of 2 guys come by in a stack with, AR-15s and, a bunch of mags on their chest. And what are you thinking? Right. And so I think they do it hoping that there will be an altercation between you and the police that ultimately ends in your own death. And so that's a very serious situation that members of Congress see all the time. And so the best thing you can do is obviously reach out to your sheriff's department, your police chief, let them know who you are, where you live, and most of them are familiar with swatting, so that at least that note is on your address.
Yeah, this past year I've done a lot of stuff personally. So easy to find where you live and stuff like that nowadays.
Yeah.
There's a lot of steps you have to take to, kind of tighten up your security.
Yep.
It's a volatile place. The world's a volatile place right now.
Yep.
So, you're in the if I get it right, you're in a subcommittee for the task force for declassifying federal secrets.
Yep.
Did I get it right?
Yeah.
What's that mean? It sounds super cool.
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of the big things that Americans are so upset about is like the lack of transparency. They're wondering, hey, why can't we put to bed who killed JFK? And so that committee goes and looks at, documents and works with, Tulsi Gabbard and other agencies to try and get the intelligence to then release it to the American people. And so I think, we've done JFK, just had a hearing on Martin Luther King Jr. I think a couple weeks back. I wasn't able to attend that one. I'm kind of looking forward to the hearings that we do on cases or situations that are in closer timeline to where we're at now, like Butler, Pennsylvania. Those are the ones that I'm looking forward to the most. But that whole effort is for transparency for the American people, because they're so tired of, hey, why don't we know more about Thomas Crooks? Why don't we still know who assassinated JFK? Why don't we know more about UFOs, right? Why is the government always trying to conceal and hide things from us, right? If this is seriously supposed to be a government that's of, by, and for the people, why don't we know?
Right.
And so that's what the whole premise of that task force is.
I love that. And it was relieving to me as we prepared for this to know that exists and that process is underway. With that, the big one right now is the Epstein files.
Yeah.
So I'll say this: I love President Trump. I think he's the greatest president in my lifetime. Probably one of the most impactful presidents in the history of this country. I served in Veterans Policy Surrogate on the last 2 campaigns.
Yeah.
One of the ways I believe President Trump landslide won this last election is he seemed to have like a real pulse on the heart of the American people.
Yep.
But with this Epstein thing, he said a few things that, that scares me, that the people it could affect the midterms because the people are so upset about it. I don't think the American people are going to move on. And he's like, saying the American people need to move on from this and why we're still talking about that. He said, one of the things he said was it was shameful what they were doing to Bill Clinton. So, again, I totally support President Trump, but I'm scared that his statements on that, pushing the American people to move on from the Epstein things, they're not going to. I'm not going to. And I don't think we should. I mean, when you see some of these emails. So do you think that the White House and needs to be more aware of what the people want when it comes to the Epstein transparency?
Yeah. So, I think this is one of the, I would say, one of the mistakes of the administration. Obviously, this was a very big story, and Americans look at this and they're like, "How was this guy Jeffrey Epstein able to get away with what he was getting away with for so long?" Right? And you have, the child exploitation side of it, trafficking kids, abusing kids, but then you have the intelligence side of it as well. That a lot of people, including myself, believe that there was probably some serious coordination between some of our intel agencies and foreign intel agencies as well, right?
Yeah.
And so we want transparency on it, right? Yeah. And so, like you, I love the president. Mm-hmm. I've supported the president for a very long time now. I love a lot of what he's done, but this isn't one of the things that I was able to go along with. Mm-hmm. And so Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna dropped the bill, the Epstein bill, for transparency. And this was after the president had tweeted out against it multiple times. And I was one of only 11 Republicans that co-sponsored the bill. And I said, when this bill gets to the floor, I'm going to vote for it. And so that was, how I decided to deal with this situation.
This going back to what you said earlier today, you're representing your constituents, not the rank and file.
Yeah. And the only thing I didn't do was I didn't sign the discharge petition, with the Democrats. And maybe I should have, but I said, I'm going to co-sponsor this bill. I'm going to put a flag down saying, hey, I think we should release all of these files. And then when it gets to the floor, I'm going to vote for it. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, good on you to do it.
Yeah.
I'm great. I'm grateful.
Yeah.
Why is anything still redacted aside from victims' names?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I obviously wasn't involved in that. I know that I will tell you, one of the concerns was, I think anybody that gets implicated in the Epstein files at this point, has a pretty good chance that their life or any future opportunities are going to be done with just because of the stain of it.
Right.
So, and this, I'm just speaking for myself. I've heard other people say it. Many might disagree with me. But I don't want, because like in an investigation this big that's gone on that many decades, even in a hometown murder investigation, there are going to be people that get investigated or are part of the investigation. They get questioned by the police that had nothing to do with it. But I don't want to see those people's lives ruined either. Like if they were found, completely not guilty, and so that might have something to do with it.
Sure. Well, even the president's a good example of that, right? Like, cause his name's mentioned 5,000 times and like he's complicit. But if you get into it, clearly my impression is the president's free and clear of.
Mine is too. And one of the reasons, Chad, is because like I saw, and so did America. America saw the Democrats do everything in their power to destroy this guy, dude.
If they had anything.
To throw him in jail for 700 years, multiple indictments across the country, tried to keep him off the ballot in certain states, tried to bankrupt him.
Yeah.
Two assassination attempts that we know of, right? And with all of that going on, he was who they were afraid of more than anybody because they understood that he had the backing of the American people. He could fill up football stadiums everywhere he went. And, it's like, you got to ask yourself, like, small town like Prescott, Arizona, rural places, right? How can a billionaire from New York City come into rural America and get a hero's welcome?
Right.
Because they actually feel like, not only does the president listen to him, but he fights for him. And so, it's just like, I don't think for a second, if Donald Trump had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein that was unlawful, I know the Democrats would have aired that out quicker than anything to destroy him.
That's
right. And so like, you can't reconcile, you just, to me, you can't reconcile that, you can't.
Yeah. 100%. We would know. They would have let it out. And, I mean, that's why I'm like, come on, like, you gotta jump back on board with the American people, what the American people want with this. I'm cheering for him to deliver, and deliver on this.
Well, he did sign it.
He did. Yeah, he did.
And I mean, after the comments that he made, he didn't have to, he could have vetoed that. He signed it, and so, I still think, I think we made a mistake as being a part of this party, but at the same time, he signed the bill. And now people are, combing through, and they're learning a lot of new things.
What do you think? So you've called for the subpoena of the Clintons.
Yeah.
Right. They've been subpoenaed. It looks like they're going to show.
Yeah. So that whole thing is pretty interesting. I was talking to Chairman Comer, the chairman of the oversight committee that I'm on, and he was telling me, kind of telling myself and others that were part of the committee that they were kind of playing cat and mouse with him, I think, hoping that, this would just die off and, there would be no follow through from the GOP and oversight on this. And he said one of the dates they sent him originally to come in before and do a deposition was on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve. And so, right there,
right,
these guys are just playing games. And so the day that we were going to vote on holding them in contempt of Congress, I remember Chairman Comer invited myself, and I think it was Scott Perry and Andy Biggs to the back of the floor, and he was telling us that they finally agreed to come in because they see that we're going to follow through on this. And so I know that they're supposed to come do a tape deposition, but now I've seen both Bill and Hillary in the media, request an actual hearing. And I think, the chairman has wisely said, well, we'll do the recorded deposition, and if you want to come talk to the committee, we can do that too. And so, instead of trying to, make this solely just a media circus, you're still going to have to do a deposition where you answer questions from our lawyers, right? And so I think that's the wise play. We'll see how it plays out.
You think there's anything there, or you think this is they walk away, did the media thing, the
I don't know, Chad. Like, the hard thing for me is, like, in many ways, I'm as frustrated as most Americans. Where I'm
two-tier justice system. That's
it's
I believe there's a two-tier justice system.
It's a frustrating place to be, man. Where you do feel like there's a two-tier justice system, and if you're connected and an elected official, there's one set of one standard for you, and one standard for everybody else. And I would love to see that change.
Yeah, same. And I don't think it's never a fair thing to say that we need America wants a pound of flesh. Like, we have to have someone, but I don't think that the American people will ever trust the justice system in America again until someone's held accountable. Someone in this two-tier system that the American people have seen as like an elite actually be held accountable for a crime.
I agree.
And I agree. I don't think we'll ever gain the trust of that system again until that happens. And so it's almost like bad that it's like lynch mob mentality to get someone.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if these crimes are committed, especially against children, especially, there has to be justice.
Yeah.
And I'll keep speaking on it, and I know you will, and others will too.
Yeah. You got to. You got to keep speaking about it.
Yeah. With before I move away from Epstein, I got to ask, like, I think you kind of speculated to where I believe when you talk about Jeffrey Epstein, and somebody just going to say, who was Jeffrey Epstein? How would you define who Jeffrey Epstein was? Like, who was he?
Well, and I don't consider myself an expert on Jeffrey Epstein at all, but, I believe, he was somebody who started out not very impressive at all, and then somehow grew to have serious wealth, serious connections, and you know, entrapped a lot of people, including himself, in all sorts of sin and, you know, child exploitation. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Jeffrey Epstein was working, you know, with our intelligence agencies and with foreign intelligence agencies to honey trap, you know, honeypot people, get dirt on them, and then use it as influence to get them to do what he wanted them to do.
Yeah, that's my personal opinion too. Is, you know, I believe unfortunately our intelligence agency, the Israeli intelligence agency, and, you know, who knows who else. I mean, when you start having that kind of information on people, it's for sale.
Yeah,
for whoever's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, I mean, you know, we're in Washington D.C. right now. Mm-hmm. There are spies and traps right out this door, just waiting for anybody willing to walk into them. And so, you know, I mean, it's going on to this day too. Like, sure, it surprises me, you know, how many individuals end up falling into those traps, because, I mean,
especially when like I said, everyone that works here, if you're in the military, you're in government, you're in a political position, you know that it's happening everywhere around you. You're aware of it, but you still.
Right. Now, and that's not to say that, you know, some clever operation couldn't be launched against any one of us, you know, and done smartly. But, you know, if you're out in town and, you know, you're not the type of guy that, you know, women typically come up and talk to, and you've got this bombshell coming up and talking to you about, you know, in a very flirtatious manner, that's a pretty good sign that, hey man, maybe just go home.
That's usually part of my brief. Like, I remember we were in Krakow, Poland, and doing our operations in Ukraine and briefing the guys, and I'm like, just so you guys know, you're not that good looking.
Yeah.
So some supermodel Russian girls comes up and start talking to you. You're not that good looking, so you probably want to move along.
Yeah. Just go home, man.
Just go home. Yeah. Kind of a fun question. Do you think Jeffrey Epstein's still alive?
I don't, but then again, you know, I'm kind of at the point now where, you know, I'm definitely open to being proven wrong, because I think a lot of things that many of us believe or used to believe were conspiracies, you know, we see a lot of them coming to light and coming true. So
there were conspiracies turned into the prophet.
I did see some of those photos of Jeffrey, you know, supposedly Jeffrey Epstein with a beard walking
with AI, though, it's hard to tell now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the thing, man. It's like, you know, it's like sometimes my kids will do that to me. They'll show me like a video of like kangaroos jumping on a trampoline, and it looks real. It looks so real. And so it's so hard to tell what's real anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I think he's still alive. But you know, that's just my fun guess. But I hope he is, so he's alive to pay for it. I move on to immigration, because I can't sit in front of you and not talk about immigration, because I know you're big on immigration. I feel like the GOP had lost the narrative on immigration. I want to read some numbers, because I believe that the GOP lost the narrative on it, and the mainstream media is like manufactured outrage over ICE. If you look at deportation, I looked this up before, so people could fact check me, but I think this is pretty accurate. Bill Clinton, 12.5 million deportations. George Bush, 10.3 million. President Obama, 5.2 million. President Trump, 1.5 million. If you add self-deportation, probably looking at a little over 3 million with self-deportation. So of all the ICE deportations, President Trump by far is the lowest. And then you have a shared ICE executive or director of ICE, Holman, who President Obama gave the presidential merit medal to for doing that job.
Right.
So how could the GOP recapture a narrative to say that here's the numbers? Like, we're not like this is not about hate and not being a nation of immigrants. We're getting rid of the people that don't belong here.
Yeah.
How can we regain that narrative?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things there. I think you're probably pretty close with your numbers there. I think you've got a couple things, working against us that you didn't have against those other presidents. I think the culture has changed a lot. I think you've got TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, that you have to factor into that. I think anything that President Trump does, the left is going to melt down over. And I think too, I think what you're seeing right now is with some of these operations that are being run against our ICE agents and the sophistication of them, you're seeing almost a political insurgency run against our ICE agents. And I think it's, the byproduct of decades and decades and decades of communist, socialist, Marxist education and the propagating of these ideologies within academia. And I'm a firm believer that the biggest threat to the United States isn't China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. I'm a big believer that the biggest threat to the United States is from within.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could really unpack that. I think anytime a nation or a family or a community turns away from God and rejects everything that God has said, you're in a period of time, you're in for trouble. And I think we're seeing the ramifications of that played out on a national level. But I think a lot of it is due to the fact that, many like myself believe that academia was gone a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so we didn't try and establish a beachhead there. We didn't fight. We didn't fight there. We ceded it as lost ground. And that's why Charlie Kirk, when I met him years ago, was so impressive to me, because he looked at a lot of us and he said, no, you guys are wrong. I'm going to establish a beachhead in academia, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to start changing hearts and minds. And, but I just think the culture is a lot different now. I don't know how you feel about this, Chad, but I do think the country has changed a lot. I mean, you're even starting to see that, even the political parties have shifted a lot. I mean, if you and I would have sat down and talked about the Democratic Party 10 years ago and during some of these administrations that you're talking about, and we would have talked about how, radical left-wing socialists were going to become the most powerful force in the Democrat Party, well, you might have agreed with that. You might not have agreed with that. But they've become a lot more radical. Like if we would have talked about this 10 years ago and said that a guy like Charlie Kirk is going to be assassinated, and there's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of videos from leftists celebrating the murder of this guy, I don't think you and I would have probably believed that.
No.
Right? I also don't think that you and I would have believed that, the United States government would have shut down the economy, told people that they couldn't associate, go to church. They'd force them to take a vaccination if we would have had that conversation 10 years ago. So I think that the times and the culture have changed a lot. And I think there's also Trump derangement syndrome going on. But to your point, those presidents deported a lot more people than the president of the United States, President Trump, has deported. And yet you're seeing these, primarily these blue states and blue cities, these sanctuary cities, riot and, try and, obstruct these investigations. I think part of it too is for them, they don't want you focused on the fraud that was just the record fraud that was just discovered in Minnesota. It's kind of a sleight of hand. Hey, look over here. Don't look over here. Look at what's going on with ICE. So I think that there's a lot of things going on there, and it's going to be hard to, I think, regain the narrative. But I do think this, Chad, we're either a nation of laws or we're not.
Right.
And so I think that we need to push through and carry on the mission. I think the American people who voted for Donald Trump, who voted for me, I think they expect us to carry on with this mission.
Oh yeah.
And it's not because we're a lot of people on the left will try and say that we're heartless and we don't care about other people. I certainly don't feel that way at all.
Well, we're still the world leader in legal
Right.
immigration.
And that's the key.
By far,
legal immigration. Yeah. But if you didn't come here legally, and if you're committing crimes, you got to go.
Yeah.
And so we definitely have an uphill battle. We're fighting against almost all of the mainstream media. Mm-hmm. We're fighting against, these organizations that are very well funded, sometimes by your taxpayer dollars, sometimes by foreign influence, that go out there and pay some of these protesters between, $4,000 to $5,000 a month to travel from city to city, with marching notes and talking points on how to obstruct ICE and, what hotels are staying in. And,
many of those are foreign funded.
Yeah, they are. And so we're either going to be a nation of laws or we're not. Mm-hmm. And, I think we owe it to the American people to carry out one of the mandates that President Trump was elected on.
Yeah, that's one of the things I voted for.
Yep.
Man, you said something so important there, though, about, we are, our culture has definitely changed and has slipped, but I believe we still are a Christian nation. I believe we've seen a revival, Charlie Kirk being part of it in our youth. And I think the left has had a loud voice, but they're not the predominant voice. And that's why we've seen President Trump, win a landslide. And that's, and I believe it's still there. And I do believe that Christ is still has been the founding solution for this country that gave us what we have here today and the opportunities that we have in America. And I believe it's the solution to maintain what we have. And I believe we're in a window of like this little olive branch that God's extended to us, because we certainly don't deserve the second chances that this country have been given. But I think people are responding to it. There's a guy, he's an incredible guy that supports me at Mighty Oaks. And I've gotten a lot of wisdom over the years. His name's Wayne. And he was considering running, for governor of California one time, and spent a lot of time in DC, and he stopped coming to DC because he said this, and I definitely don't disagree with coming to DC, but for him, he stopped coming to DC because he's like, I felt like I couldn't make the impact in DC, but the way to change America was not in DC, but the way to change America was through men, and the only way to change men was through their hearts, and the only way to change their hearts was through Christ. Yep. And so he really focused on ministry, and so I think we've seen this revival through ministries, and men starting to rise up. I got a chance to speak at all these men's conferences and seen this. I mean, man, a few years ago, I'd go speak at a men's conference, and if we got 300 or 400 men, it would be amazing. I can tell you, like, probably a half dozen times this year, I've spoken at men's conferences. We've had, I was just at Joe B. Martin's church in 1122. We had 7,000 men show up.
Yep.
Like, I was just at this other the years before. I was in Hope and Ocala. They had used the church. The church is only 1,200 members, and on a Sunday night we had 1,000 men show up.
Yep.
That's more than the population of men in that church. Like, so men are starting to rise up and in their communities, and a lot of the youth. And Charlie Kirk, I think, is a big part of that, and his legacy definitely lives through that.
Yep.
It'll change the culture of this country. And
I hope you're right, brother.
Yeah, I mean, same here. When you talk about immigration, I don't know if this number's up to date.
I hear all the time up here that you had between 15 and 20 million illegal immigrants come under the Biden administration.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think it depends on what source you're looking at. But one thing I do want to point out about that, Chad, is I do believe that what the president's doing is working. And one of the reasons I believe that is because if you look at the drop in the murder rates, here in the country,
violent crimes, like
it's plummeting, right? And I think that was one of the reasons that President Trump had such a strong mandate, because it was so regular for you to turn on your phone in the morning and see a Laken Riley or some beautiful young American girl that had her life in front of her that was murdered and raped, or Jocelyn Nungri, or so many other young Americans that had their lives in front of them being taken away. And imagine that, like, you've got kids, right?
Yeah.
it'd be hard enough if your kid got raped and murdered. But if that happened from somebody who you knew wasn't even supposed to be in the country and the federal government failed you, like think of like the extra salt in the wound there. And I think that's why like President Trump had such a strong mandate, was because we just saw it every single week. And those were just the ones we were seeing.
Right.
And so, it's like, the way I feel like is if you're going to come to this country and we're going to let you into this country, not only should you be a productive member of society, but you should assimilate to our culture and our values as well. And I just don't see that with a lot of I don't see that with a lot of the folks that come to this country.
Well, particularly, and you mentioned this before, and I'm a really strong believer in it because of living abroad, living in Islamic countries. The allowance of Sharia law to be, if this isn't a religious belief, it's a way of life that's inconsistent with our culture. It's not assimilation. And not only that, a lot of the Sharia law is illegal. Those behaviors are illegal in America. So, I mean, this is this is a problem. This assimilation problem when you talk about Sharia.
If you ask me, Chad, what keeps me up at night, it's this problem right here.
Yeah.
And if you talk about this, you're going to be called an Islamophobe, right? But I think what's even happening here, it's a bigger issue. Some call it the Red and Green Alliance, right? And so you have the leftists who are aligning themselves with Islamists, right? And the outcome is what you see in New York City with Mondami getting elected. And a lot of people don't realize this because it hasn't hit close to home, or it hasn't hit a town near you yet. But like even in Texas, they're trying to form, Islamic cities. And if you talk about Sharia law, if people want to live under Sharia law, if you want to live under Sharia law, knock yourself out. I think there's 57 countries in the world where you can go do that. But when you try and bring it here and you compare Sharia law with U.S. law and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, they don't work together at all. For all the women that are watching this show, you will not be treated as an equal. You will not be treated, you'll be treated as property. And a lot of women don't understand because they haven't spent any time in the Middle East, where, this stuff is heavily, practiced. You will be treated as property. Your husband can beat you, right? If you're gay, the punishment for being gay is death. If you're an apostate, if you leave the religion, the punishment is death, right? And let's be honest, not all Muslims subscribe to, the letter of the law, radical nature of, what you and I are talking about, Sharia law. But, it's the fastest growing religion in the world. I think, 2 billion people. Many reports say, 10 to 20% believe in jihad or holy war. And, want Sharia law. That's still tens of millions of people. That's a ton of, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I want to keep this place for my kids, hopefully grandkids one day, yours as well, and for every other American out there, that wants to be able to have freedom of speech, pray how they want to pray, say what they want to say. Like if you want to understand, how many of these folks feel about freedom of speech, go insult, the Prophet Muhammad in a mosque right now. Let me know if you have freedom of speech. Go say the same thing in a Christian church. Go and insult Christ. You will have much different experiences, right? And that's one of the things that we did when we formed this Sharia Free America Caucus. One of the things that we wanted to do was start opening up dialogue in the conversation in the United States of America, but also try and pass legislation that would make it very difficult for them to gain a much bigger foothold. And that's what they want. And for Americans that don't understand that, the reason they don't go to the 57 countries where they could practice Sharia law, the reason that they're bringing it here is because their ultimate goal is a global caliphate. That's what they want.
Right. Yeah.
They want to bring everybody under the submission of Islam, right?
Yeah.
And for anybody that's ever dealt with it,
Yeah.
it's not patty cake.
No, it's convert. It's convert or die.
It's
and
convert
they're
or
allowed
die.
to lie and be nice to you until they get
Yeah.
you there. But
Yep.
I mean, look at London right now. Like
Yeah.
that.
Look at Europe right now, man.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting, Chad, because when I was at SEAL Team 3, probably 20 years ago, long before the military, started down this woke and DEI path, we had a Department of Defense intel guy come in and give us a brief. And his brief was basically about Islamists breeding us out in the West.
Yeah.
And he had a chart for when each nation would fall.
I seen that.
France, England, you know, the U.S., you know, and because what he told us, if I can remember exactly what he told us, he said something to the fact if they're having 7 kids per family to your, 2.2 at the time, I think it's dropped even lower.
They'll outbreed us.
Right. Yeah. And so Americans, better wake up. Any of the things, and I tell people all the time, I know that not everybody agrees with me, especially in DC. A lot of folks in DC think that, China is our biggest threat. And they have good reasons for thinking that, right? They look at spreadsheets, they look at how many submarines do they have, how many aircraft carriers, how many 5th generation fighters do they have, how many soldiers can they put in the field, etc. What's their economic ability to sustain a war? They look at all those things, but I fully believe that the biggest threat to the United States are ideologies and harmful, theologies that do not comport, with our Constitution or our Bill of Rights, because we still have the strongest military in the world, Chad. We do. Now, are other nations catching up to us? Yeah. But I think we're much better positioned to take on other nation states when it comes to a kinetic war than we are to deal with socialism, Marxism, communism, Islamists, right, and radical Islam, than any of those things.
Particularly when you had this, like we talked about, whatever number is 15 million, whatever, open borders. We don't know who came, where they are. And I know you've said before that there's a document 18,000.
Well, that info didn't come from me. That came from Joe Kent, who's over at the
great guy, by the way.
National Counterterrorism Center. Yeah. He came right before Homeland Security, right across the hall, and he told us, everybody, Democrats and Republicans, that according to their analysis, they had 18,000 known or suspected terrorists in the country. And so I actually asked him to come to my office a few days later, and I said, hey, is that number so high because the president declared these cartels terrorist organizations? And he said no. He said, that's not the case. We're not talking about cartel members. We're talking about Al Qaeda, ISIS, and other affiliated groups.
And then we look at things like things like how vulnerable a grid is.
Yep.
Things. I mean, I'm on the board for Center for Security Policy, and you get to see the grid analysis, and it's terrifying. Yep. I interviewed Tommy Waller on this show, and I mean, when you get a vulnerable grid like we have, and then 18,000 a minimum that we know of terrorists in this country.
We've got the Olympics coming up. We've got FIFA World Cup coming up. Massive events, and anybody that knows anything about terrorists knows that not only do they want their attacks to be as violent and brutal as possible, but they want to get the biggest bang for their buck as far as PR and media.
Yeah.
So they'll often target events like that are going to have cameras from all over the world on them.
Yeah. Yeah. We are definitely in a vulnerable state. How do we, from sitting where you sit and seeing what you do, what's going on here in DC, how can we turn that around to secure this nation? Like what has to happen to secure us from that internal threat?
Well, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, but a lot of times in the United States, we've had it so good for so long here that people get very complacent, and you almost have to have like a 9/11 type attack before people wake up and are like, oh my God, what have we been doing? And this is something that I've seen, with being on a task force in Homeland Security for FIFA and the Olympics. and how to secure those events. One of our biggest concerns has been drone attacks for a long time, right? The whole drone warfare situation over in Europe and how quickly technology is coming online. You see the cartels starting to use drones. You know, it's just a matter of time before you get some of these homegrown terrorists or some of the guys that you know, Director Kent's talking about in the country now that get a drone swarm.
Yeah.
Drone swarm going, you know, for one of these stadiums where you got, you know, close to 100,000 people in the stadium, thousands of people outside the stadium. And, you know, it's like, it's hard for us to even get members of Congress to pay attention to it and be willing to do something about it. And, you know,
I mean, if you look at 4th of July, have you seen these displays, like these drone displays on 4th of July and things? I mean, if they could make a giant like mural in the sky moving.
Yeah.
Imagine, you know, you put an attack into a program like that.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you swat them out of the sky? How do you stop something like that? That's I mean, I don't know that we can. So it's like not unless you preemptively like
Yeah, well, we do have some pretty cool technologies. I'm sure you've seen some of them overseas.
Right.
We actually have some cool.
But of course, you have to know like the attack's coming comes with it to be.
Yeah, and we actually have some pretty cool technologies. The biggest problem up here in Washington, D.C. is to give state and locals the authorities to mitigate them, right? Because a lot of our radar systems can tell that they're inbound and incoming. I was at the Army-Navy game a couple weeks ago with Director Crane from the Secret Service. And while I was in the command post, they had a drone that they were interdicting and landing at another site. A lot of the radar systems and sensors that are deployed can tell you that they're coming or they're inbound. But even having the authorities, you know, is it to interdict them and take them down? That's a tough thing. So just getting members of Congress educated on, you know, that threat and how it's a new threat that most of our security systems aren't designed to deal with, and, you know, don't have the authorities to even deal with them if they know they're coming. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, just watching, you know, I've been to Ukraine, you know, 10 times since the invasion, and our team's been there like 30 times, and watching the evolution on the battlefield real time of the drone threat. I'm watching this. I'm like, the battlefield has changed forever.
Oh yeah.
Like, and that includes the homeland. Yep. So it's a real threat. And I'm glad to know you guys are, you know, obviously aware of it.
Yeah.
And man, so what else? I guess, you know, I've asked you a ton of questions. What is it that is on your heart and you're working on that's most important in this office for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple local pieces of legislation that we're working on in this office. One of the things isn't even legislation. There's two little towns in my district called Globe and Miami. Mm-hmm. They're old mining towns that, you know, have been forgotten about. The environmentalists obviously destroyed those towns when they started trying to run mining out of the United States decades ago. And they just got hit with, over the last several years, they've been hit with severe wildfires and flooding on the aftermath of that. That's kind of decimated their small town. And so we're working with FEMA to try and get some disaster relief money for those guys. And you know, so we're working on some local issues like that. You know, FISA reauthorization is coming up here soon. That's going to be a must-pass bill that, you know, we're trying to get some changes made to it for the sake of the American people and to protect their constitutional rights. But for me, I'm just like trying to figure out, all right, God, you got me up here. What do you got next for me? Do you want me to stay up here?
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping he doesn't. But, you know, and what do you got for me next? And, you know, how do I serve you?
I mean, it's everyone sees, you know, you as a front facing member of your family here, but a lot of times people don't realize behind you is, you know, a wife, children, your family. Like, so much sacrifice beyond yourself to your family for you to have to be up here all the time, be away from your family.
Yep.
Your phone 24/7, like this incredible amount of sacrifice. How could people listening be praying for you and your family?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking that. That's the best thing that anybody can do for me is just pray for protection for me and my family, and then wisdom and discernment. Those are the things I ask for all the time, man.
Yeah. Anything you could share about your family? Like you want who's your family? Like,
Yeah, I'm a girl dad,
yeah.
so a lot of team guys are,
Yeah.
and some people say it's because of diving that we do. I don't really know, but maybe God's just got a sense of humor. But I'm pretty fortunate, I think, to be a girl dad because they've taught me a lot of patience, which I needed.
Yeah.
And I've got a cheer dad shirt. My youngest is a cheerleader. My oldest is getting ready to go to college, and so I'm excited for her to take that next step.
Did you stay in Arizona?
Yeah, she's gonna stay in Arizona and see how she handles that. That next step into adulthood. And
Yeah.
I didn't get home to see my daughters this weekend. We had a conference in Miami, a political conference, but my wife did come out and join me for that, so that was nice. She tries to get out and travel with me when she can, so
Awesome.
It's always nice to have your best friend. That it's so cool too, man, because we have a 95% divorce rate in the SEAL teams, and her and I have been married since I started down that path, and
Wow.
we've been through a lot together, and I'm just grateful that God gave me such an amazing wife.
That's awesome, man.
Yep.
And with this, I like to ask every guest this. You have a tremendous, you had a tremendous life and are having a tremendous life now, and lots of lessons there. The show is called The Resilient Show.
Yep.
And so some parting words of wisdom on those listening on how to live a resilient life.
Yeah, I think, the verse that comes to my mind is seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. The Lord knows what we need. The Lord designed us in a way that, that we desire what we desire. But I found that if I try and do things my own way, I usually screw them up. And so I try and learn more about him and what his design, is for, each and every one of us. And I also even try and take, many of his rules as not that he's trying to keep me away from fun but he's trying to actually protect me. And I think we do the same thing with our kids a lot of the time. But
yeah,
I'm just grateful that, the Lord showed me a lot of grace, and that he gave his life for me. And I would recommend it, especially any young man out there. Life is short. You only go around one time. Don't be afraid to take chances. Don't look at failure as a stop sign. Learn to look at failure as a detour sign. Okay, that didn't work out. How am I gonna solve the problem the next time? How am I gonna dust myself up, get up, accomplish this mission? But don't become that old man, 30, 40, 50 years from now saying woulda, coulda, shoulda, I wish I would have tried. Because there's a lot of things that we're gonna fail at. And I never want my fear of failure to not only stop me from becoming who God, wants me to be, but from living that purpose-driven, life. And a lot of the times, the sad thing is, because I can easily fall into comfort and laziness.
yeah,
It's just one of my personality traits. But I found that often the adventure and the fulfillment in life is, when you're out there, saying, send me, I'll get in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And don't just self-disqualify either, because that's something that I struggle with too. Like even up here, I'm like, how could God use a knucklehead like me up here in Washington? But when you look throughout the scriptures, God's constantly choosing men and women that don't make a lot of sense. And so, yeah, man, you go around once, go big.
Well, man, I really appreciate this, and we'll have to link back up and do it again. Well, maybe we can do it at Grant's place.
Yeah,
At the Founding Fathers.
I would love that.
Down in the Speakeasy.
Yeah.
So
maybe we'll make sure you buy a house when you're out there, dude.
yeah. I I was just texting Rob and Sam this week, and I got to get up there. I just, when I go up there, it feels like time stops. So everything slows down.
Yeah, I just went dove hunting with them up there probably about 3 weeks ago. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Grant gave me a dead man's gun. He gave me a gun that didn't even work. And I was like, I didn't even have a shot at a bird. But, you know, I realized that the weapon didn't work. And I was like, I wasn't even upset at him. I was like, well played, Grant. You know, you gave me a dead man's gun. So
we'll have to get you an invite. I don't know if you fans of the Robertsons at all, but I've become very good friends with the Robertson family.
Yeah,
Jay Stone.
We watch, you know, we used to watch all the Duck Dynasty stuff, and I sent them that, and I know they got bombarded with stuff, but I made them some custom bottle breachers and sent them to their address.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, but
very good friends with the family, and John Howard is which Cora Robertson's father, and Willie's father-in-law is my book agent, and then and then Jay Stone is like one of my, and Jace, they're like just great friends. And so I actually just missed this hunt. It's a veterans hunt, and they had one round they shot 50 ducks in one morning.
Oh,
and so it's like with Chad Wright. I introduced Chad Wright to them, and Blake Cook, and my son was there, but I couldn't make it. So but if you ever want to go out and shoot some birds down there, I know they would love to have you. So
that'd be rad.
We'll all go up. And, it's just early and cold, which the colder it is, the better the ducks are. But
right on. Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah. God bless, man. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this interview with Congressman Eli Crane. Amazing human being, amazing patriot to our country. To sacrifice so much on the battlefield of combat and in the cause of freedom, but serving here in Washington, D.C. as one of our congressmen. And he does it, one of those that do it for the right reasons. Man, give him a shout out, like this episode, leave a comment for him and for us, and then share it as far and wide as possible. And if you're not already done so, please join our Patreon. We have a special segment, a little message from Congressman Crane on what happens here, like a little tip, a secret behind the scenes of what happens in Washington, D.C. Join our Patreon for as low as $5 a month and get advanced episodes every week, commercial free, and access to lots more of information behind the scenes of The Resilient Show. Stay tuned for more to come, and God bless, and stay resilient. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled, and you don't want to miss it.